Welcome back to Cozy Cabin's History, where we explore the stories that shaped our world. Today's episode is a companion to Echoes of Japan, the Edo Period, our second installment in the series on Japan's fascinating history. If you haven't listened to that episode yet, I highly recommend checking it out first for a broader look at the era that Tokugawa Ieyasu helped create. In this episode, we'll dive deep into the life of Ieyasu himself, the brilliant strategist and patient leader whose vision shaped the Edo period and brought peace to a war-torn Japan. So, settle in with a warm drink, and let's uncover the story of the man who united a nation and forged a dynasty. And of course, don't forget to hit that follow button so you never miss an episode. Born into turmoil. Let's set the stage. Japan in the mid-1500s was in the middle of the Sengoku period, or the Warring States era. Picture a land where every castle is a fortress, every samurai a potential enemy. Lords, or daimyos, waged constant war over territory. Alliances were as fleeting as the cherry blossoms in spring, and betrayals were a daily occurrence. It was in this turbulent time that Tokugawa Ieyasu was born in 1543 in a small province called Mikawa. He wasn't born Tokugawa Ieyasu, though. His birth name was Matsudara Takechiyo. And from the moment he took his first breath, life was far from easy. Takechiyo's father, the Lord of Mikawa, was assassinated when the boy was just 6 years old. Shortly after, he was sent away as a hostage to the neighboring Imagawa clan, essentially a pawn in a political game. Imagine being a child in a foreign castle, surrounded by enemies, not knowing if you'd ever see your family again. But instead of breaking him, these early experiences taught Takechiyo the art of survival. He learned patience, diplomacy, and the importance of picking your battles wisely, traits that would define him for the rest of his life. Rise through the ranks. By the time he was a young man, Takechiyo had grown into a sharp and pragmatic leader. He eventually reclaimed his family's lands, took on the name Tokugawa Ieyasu, and began to align himself with powerful figures of the time. Enter Oda Nobunaga, the fiery warlord with a vision of uniting Japan. Ieyasu became one of Nobunaga's most loyal allies, learning from his audacity and ruthlessness. Together they began carving out a path towards peace, or at least control. But the road to power is never smooth. After Nobunaga's assassination in 1582, Ieyasu had to think fast. While others hesitated, he quickly aligned himself with Toyotomi Hideyoshi, Nobunaga's successor, and another brilliant strategist. Hideyoshi didn't fully trust Ieyasu. Let's be honest. Who would trust a man as calculating as Ieyasu? But he knew his value. Hideyoshi granted Ieyasu control of the Kanto region, a wild and untamed frontier at the time. This move, while seemingly isolating Ieyasu, actually set him up for future dominance. The Battle of Sekigahara. And now we come to the pivotal moment in Ieyasu's story, the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600. Picture a misty autumn morning, the fields covered in dew, with over 150,000 warriors prepping for battle. This wasn't just a clash of armies. It was a clash of visions for Japan's future. On one side, Ieyasu, leading the Eastern Army, a mix of loyal samurai and opportunistic allies. On the other side, the Western Army, loyal to Toyotomi Hideyoshi's young heir. It was a high-stakes gamble for Ieyasu, but he had spent years positioning himself for this moment. His strategy? Divide and conquer. Through cunning diplomacy, he convinced key Western generals to betray their side mid-battle. When the dust settled, Ieyasu stood victorious. The battle wasn't just a military triumph, it was a statement. Ieyasu had proved he was the strongest daimyo in Japan. The shogunate begins. 3 years later, in 1603, Tokugawa Ieyasu was officially declared shogun. This title wasn't just symbolic. It gave him almost absolute power over Japan. He moved the capital to Edo, the city we know now as Tokyo, and began laying the foundation for a new era of peace. But Ieyasu wasn't naive. He knew that power was fleeting if not managed carefully. To secure his family's rule, he implemented strict policies to weaken the power of the other daimyos, like the alternate attendance system, which required them to spend every other year in Edo under his watchful eye. And then there was his foreign policy. The Tokugawa Shogunate closed Japan off from most of the outside world in a policy known as Sakuko. While trade with a few countries like the Dutch and the Chinese continued, Japan became largely self-sufficient. This isolation helped maintain stability, but also preserve Japan's unique culture and traditions. Reflections on legacy. Ieyasu abdicated as shogun in 1605, handing the title to his son, but make no mistake, he still held the reins of power. He spent the final years of his life solidifying his legacy, writing laws and mentoring his successors. When he passed away in 1616, he left behind a dynasty that would rule over Japan for 250 years. The Tokugawa era, or Edo period, is often remembered as a time of peace and prosperity, a stark contrast to the chaos of Ieyasu's youth. He was a man who understood the long game, someone who knew when to wait, when to act, and how to ensure his vision outlived him. So, what can we learn from Tokugawa Ieyasu? Perhaps it's his patience, his ability to see beyond the moment. His motto, "Patience is victory," reminds us that sometimes the greatest achievements come not from rushing ahead, but from waiting for the right moment to strike. Thank you for joining me today on this journey through the life of Tokugawa Ieyasu. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit follow so you don't miss our next. Until then, take care, and I'll see you next time in the Cozy Cabin.